that I've had a few words with these players in secret. Hopefully PA will pick up on my OBS in just a second. Now, Nick said that he has been practicing with a guy in the community called Smurf, using a Smurf account. Hopefully that will pick up in just a second. And as a result of that, he's prepared well on these maps. Why is that? Give me just a second. There we go. Ah, we're in.
Minor technical issues. No PA tournament stream would be complete without some kind of technical issues. I think if we've got them in early, got them out of the way now, Marshall, that's it. We're clear. That's it.
Right. Meanwhile, Andreas has been knows that Nick has been avoiding playing him to prepare. But when they have met, Andreas has been trying to throw him curveballs by playing really cheesy, weird strategies to stop Nick from getting too comfortable with playing against Andreas. I do wonder what could well happen with this game. What are your thoughts?
I'll be honest with you, I have absolutely no idea, because if Andreas is saying that he's got curveballs ready to go, and Nick, we think has been practicing as business as usual, this could really go either way. Either the tried and tested methods will prevail, or the new curveball strategies will come out to play. Let's see what the players are doing, Marshall.
Yeah, and right here we can see Nick on the North Spawn in his customary blue colour, going for a bots first into what looks like an air second, vehicles third, so a very early vehicles play, particularly as far as the meta goes, and this is Forge of course, so it's quite a small gap between the bases. Back down to the south though, we have Andreas in purple, with bots first again into air second, what looks like bots third, and then vehicles, so a slight difference there in the builds.
So the bots, of course, the smaller, faster-moving bots allow you to expand and to harass a lot earlier on than the slower-moving, more heavily armoured vehicles. Also augmented by both sides having the air factory up and ready to go, some scouts out, and some Icarus, and interestingly, these early raiding Icarus units coming across here to try and pick off fabricators where they can, supported by a Firefly scout plane to give them the sight advantage.
And Nick there backing off. He sees that no units have come out to this 4 expansion just yet, but it won't be long before they do. And he's just trying to keep his Icarus safe and sound there. Of course, in the latest balance patch, Icarus have got a massive speed increase, which allows them to be a bit more of a postured raider in the early game here before air really gets going. Unfortunately for Nick though, Andreas had an additional interceptor there, which was able to take out that Icarus before it went and picked off those fabricators, which are now expanding to that 4 point.
On a map as small as Forge, these early tussles really do have a significant knock-on effect. So the loss of that early Icarus there is allowing Andreas to expand a lot faster and a lot further than he would have been able to do had his early fabricators been harassed from the skies. So that's going to play into his hands. Nick, of course, trying to discourage his opponent from expanding. Expansion means absolutely everything in this game. The more metal extractors you can pick up, the better off you will be in the long term. But you have to fight for control of part of the planet, which is what this is all about. We've got a nice early raid now coming in from Andreas.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to do a huge amount, but it is good to be aggressive. It gets in your opponent's mind. Nick there, ready to defend. He has an equal number of bots in defense, and he's getting that forward vehicle factory up there as well. Fortunately for this 4 metal site here, it's got a lot of narrow entryways in there, so it's going to be quite difficult for Andreas to get in there with a load of docks there. Thank you for the subscription, Cyberpunk.
That's not going to. Now we can see the advantage of this early vehicle build coming out. Now we have the slightly heavier ants now, and the ants are really good at picking off docks because they have the longer range. They have a lot more armor. So docks against ants are always going to come off badly. We now see Nick starting to push through with the ants, supporting his docks, which means that any tussle against Andreas's primarily docks-based army, he's going to come off the better. We now see the ants starting to roll off for Andreas as well, evening the odds. It's all about that rush now to try and get the heavier, hard-hitting units to push into their opponent's base and take out that all-important commander.
Yeah, who's going to have the better trades, really? And looking at the army counts there, still very, very similar. Factory counts, very, very similar. Fabricator counts, very, very similar. So it's all to play for still. Nick, it should be noted, has this little skitter in the back of Andreas's base, so he's going to be able to see what's going on, and he's actually moving it in. He's being very brazen with this. He wants to see if he can see a T2, given that he's started his own factory. He doesn't see a T2, meanwhile starting his own on the north. So if that gets finished before Andreas really gets his T2 going, that could have something of a significant impact in the latter part of this game.
We're now starting to see the more aggressive expansion paying off now for Andreas, feeling like he's got confidence to do so. On the back of the planet, over to the right-hand side of his base, he's got a few fabricators now, just picking up some extra metal deposits with some light building defenses there, just to keep those going. Now seeing the buff that was recently given to the Grenadiers now coming into play. They've got an extended range and more accurate fire, and they're really good at this early raiding against vehicle factories or against any factories and buildings on your opponent's front lines. And Nick has now started to push in with this little army here and just try and goad Andreas into coming out of his base and reacting.
And he's going to have to do that because he's got a couple of Grenadiers in there which are going to be able to shoot over these rocks here. As long as Nick can really position well, that'll be really good for him. He's got an Inferno at the front there, which was soaking up a little bit of damage. Andreas now being forced to come out. He doesn't have the unit count favouring him in this instance. He has killed off all of those Grenadiers. Andreas coming in with his own Grenadiers now from the other side, going to be hiding behind this factory and the other units here. But he really needs to do something about this force before they take too much health off this factory and potentially even finish it off. And actually, Nick here coming in with a combat fab that's going to keep these tanks alive, especially against Grenadiers, which only really chip away at the armor rather than deal decisive blows. Really interesting tactics coming out here from Nick in comparison to Andreas.
Absolutely. So this is the interesting contrast we have here. We actually have Andreas now floating both metal and energy. He's not actually able to use all of his eco, and that is because he has been, while Nick has been pressing on his front door, he's been expanding out to the sides and trying to pick up as much extra metal as he can. Although Nick now has got an early T2, he doesn't really have the eco to support it just yet. He needs to continue expanding. Otherwise, what he's going to find is that this metal advantage that Andreas is now taking advantage of is going to play out in his favor in the longer term. We've got a Locust from Nick now going around the back door, trying to pick off these metal extractors, and it's going to do so successfully because there are no point defenses here to get rid of those.
Yeah,
that's going to run then into these fabricators, and if he's quick, he can get these fabricators gone before they have a chance to finish that defense, and he has. He's going to pick off all of this expansion with a single Locust. That's really poor prep from Andreas there defending that.
Meanwhile, on the front door now, we've got the T2 knocking on the door. We've got some slammers in there. AndreasG has just finished his T2 bot, so it's all going to come down to who can get the better engagements here. Nick now coming in with a Blue Hawk, which is going to definitely be able to fire some decisive blows over these rocks. And Nick certainly now pushing in with this superior army force. The army count actually favours AndreasG, but the majority of that, is still kind of stuck around in the other side of the planet and still kind of T1 heavy.
Absolutely, we now see that the eco advantage has been narrowed significantly. Those raids by Nick, picking off the metal, which Andreas has been very, very desperately building around to the side there, all been picked off, and now Nick has got the advantage in units. He's got very close in terms of eco, and he is knocking on Andreas' front door.
He definitely is, but Andreas still keeping Nick away. He's managing to keep his expansions in check. Nick, though, has to keep picking away at the expansions. We just saw one where Andreas had expanded pretty much close to just outside Nick's base there. Nick's finishing that off with extreme prejudice. But now, if we just take a zoom out for a second and we have a look at the T2 counts here. From Nick, in terms of T2, we've got about 8, 9, possibly 10 T2 units there. Andreas, though, really lacking in that T2 count, and that could be crucial, especially if we get things like Blue Hawks and Slammers getting picked off on the front lines, particularly those Blue Hawks. Nick now coming out with sniper bots down the main approach and Slammers down the side. Andreas is starting to feel the pinch, but he still maintains his metal lead because of his expansion round to the east.
One chink I've just noticed in Nick's armor, there is absolutely zero anti-air on any of his frontline units. He just put one spinner in for good measure there, but up until this point he's had no anti-air, and so I think Andreas has transitioned to starting to build a few bombers in his base, and that is giving him the ability to pick off these slammers before they're able to get to their targets.
Yeah, it should be noted that Nick really hasn't managed to keep up with the air game, and Andreas's air presence now is significantly larger than that of Nick, and Nick really needs to focus on maybe getting an additional air factory, but right now he's just putting everything into this push. He's assisting his T2 factory with his commander, which is generally what players do now, because it gets those units built faster. It's more efficient than building more factories at this point. And it's a case of, can Andreas's bombers, as you say, defend him significantly and effectively enough? And it's looking a bit shaky, to be honest.
The walls are thankfully absorbing some of the impact here. That's a good choice, using the combat fabricator to build these very cheap, inexpensive walls to soak up some of that damage. Nick now being forced to pull back, realizing his units just don't have enough to knock down the front door. So what is he going to do about that? If he can't go through the front door, can he get around the back door somewhere? Can he do anything about these expansions? Because it looks like the front door is not quite as wide open as he's hoping. So he's come back now, he's reamassed his units.
Yeah, maybe this will be the push that he needs. Andreas needs to get behind his walls. Just managed to get a slammer lost there before. Doesn't want to chase Nick out here too much. And Nick getting a little surrounded here. But again, keeping that army count advantage.
I'm just seeing these little cheeky expansions from Andreas all around the back. And Nick is doing a fairly good job of picking them off with these locusts that he's sending left, right, and Charlie, but there's quite a few of these little outcrops here, just defended by a couple of point defense towers, and that is giving Andreas the eco advantage here throughout.
It is, and it's keeping his economy very, very far ahead, and Nick has not expanded. I saw a couple of fabbers go out towards the east a little bit, but for some reason they went towards Andreas's side first, rather than a back round towards his safer metal. And I think that metal advantage is what's keeping Andreas alive at this point, and he's had a couple of really good unit trades there. And it's allowing him to come back into this game now, really pulling ahead in the army count. But we're gonna have to see what happens when Nick comes out with his T2 vehicles. He's struggling for metal, he's struggling for power, and that's going to mean that he's going to be replenishing his units a lot slower, being forced now to go on the defensive. We can see his units now retreating into his narrow passes on the front doors of his base. Andreas now taking the advantage.
I think we're now starting to see the impact of the aggressive expansion that Andreas has continued to focus on throughout this game. Even though Nick has been sat there slamming into him, if you pardon the pun, he has been constantly sending out fabricators round to the back of the planet, picking up more metal extractors when he can, and he's now in a stage where he's able to directly confront Nick's commander there if he so chooses to push through. There's not enough there to kill him, but there's definitely enough to make him think twice about coming out to play at the front lines again.
And it's further
using
pinching his eco.
Cover.
Yeah, that's a good strategy that's often used, is using building wreckage to get your commander and hightailing it out of there. A single wall emplacement is keeping that commander from losing any more health. An uber cannon there to keep this commander in the fight. But Andreas now has really caught Nick with his trousers down, as it were, in terms of that lack of expansion, and he's punishing it big time.
Absolutely. That was Nick's primary expansion there. It's just been taken out by that small force, and that commander's now been forced to again invest more economy rebuilding his metal extractors just to keep himself afloat. He's down to 38% efficiency, which means his buildings are building at approximately 1/3 the speed that they should be, and he's now going to be struggling. There's a large force from Andreas about to come and knock on the front door.
Yeah, and we're going to go down into first-person view of this army as it wanders up that main approach. Andreas's air there, sitting sentry over
I don't
the
see
pass.
that there's anything that Nick can do about this. I think he's going to lose both of those advanced factories, which is really going to set on the back foot. In fact, this could be the decisive move. In fact, there it is.
That's the GG right there. Nick concedes game one.
That was a very intimate first game in terms of the fact that both of those players were positioned so close to each other on such a small planet. There was so little room to maneuver, and everything that they did, you could see immediately the impact it would have on their opponent. And I think the aggressive focus that Nick held on a single aggressive lane there almost tunnel visioned him, while Andreas was allowed to sort of sneak around the sides and just press home his advantage. If you look at the whole globe now, it's purple. And that's not just because Nick's deleted his units, that's because that's where Andreas has been expanding to this whole game. To get 271 metal income on Forge, I think, is absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, a really, really strong opener. And perhaps that will set Nick on a bit of a back foot, because I was talking to Nick before Andreas hopped into Discord earlier, and he goes, "Oh, Forge. Oh, I'm good at Forge. I've practiced a lot on Forge. I know the plays for Forge. I've got a Conrush strat. I've got all of these different strats for Forge, and I'm all ready." And he hasn't taken the first point. Let's have a chat to them and see what they think after that first game.
Let's do it.
Well, gents.
GG, well played.
Let's
both of you.
Let's start with Andreas. What do you think went so well for you in that game?
Probably that I knew exactly what we was going to do, so it's a matter of just trying to counter that.
And
I played Nick on this map before, and he focuses down that tier 2 rush and try and push you. So you just got to place the tier 2 properly, defend against the locust, and make sure you don't die to the first push, and then you got the map and you win.
And Nick, how come you weren't able to adapt to what Andreas was able to throw at you in that one?
About execution, especially losing a lot of units for free to air. I think that largely gave him, especially in the early pushes, that gave him leeway that he should not have had. And from there on, once my major push didn't work, since I didn't invest in fabs to expand, the energy crash was inevitable, and the metal crash was even more inevitable.
Yeah, unfortunately, you suffered quite heavily right at the end there when Andreas pushed forward and got your closest metal expansion, took out those 4, and I think that was the stage at which you probably started to realise that this was turning on you. I think throughout that though, Nick, you were certainly the more aggressive player. Andreas, did you feel under pressure throughout most of that?
Well, there is a critical time when he pushes your 4, especially with the tier 2, and that's the moment where the strategy is built around. Like, you're trying to break through there, and that's when you're at the most pressure. So I felt a little bit of pressure then, but when I held that off, I knew I was going to assist out enough units to keep them defended, I guess.
Well, it was very well played from both of you, but at this point now, Nick, as the loser of that game, you get to choose what map we're playing on next. We've got the pool of 6. Dihidri.
Wow.
Yep.
Going straight in there with the naval. What have you got to say about that?
Again? Oh yeah.
Which map is that again?
Oh, that one. You can open naval, no open air, Nick. Is that the deal?
Oh yeah, boy. Especially with Icarus, I think you're in for a really fun run.
I mean, I'm not going to play like Kiwi on this map. It's not like I'm going to let you expand with the air. So we'll see.
I'm very, very happy to see you try.
Just like on Forge, huh?
So this is a 2-spawn map. Do you guys want to get inside each other's heads in terms of maybe hint at which spawn you're going to go for? Or are you going to keep your lips sealed? Nick?
Andreas knows which spawn I'm going to go for.
Meet me at the close spawn, Nick, and we'll battle it out, huh?
I'm coming for you, baby.
All right, guys, we shall leave you to your preparations. We will dip down back into the casting channel, and we will chat to you after this game.
Yeah. Join in as soon as you can, folks. We'll be waiting. Woohoo!
Well, there's some trash talk going on in there, isn't there, Marshall?
I think they're enjoying this. Something tells me. Something tells me they're enjoying this.
As I said, that was a very aggressive, very fast game. Do you think we're going to see anything quite like that on this map? Bearing in mind, this is Dihidri, and for those of you who study etymology in 20 degree in the chat, you'll know Dia is the fact that we've got 2 spawns, and Hydri is because it's got water on it. So, what do we reckon in terms of the pacing of this? Are we going to see the same aggressive pushing directly into
Oh, this is really nice.
We may well see that aggressive pushing. Apologies there with the notification popping right out of things. But I'm thinking that either they will both go close or they will both go far. Either they will have just trash talked each other into caution, or they've just rolled up both their sleeves and they're going to be fisticuffs at the close spawn.
Well, I mean, there's only one way to find out, isn't there, Marshall?
There most certainly is. Now, just before we do hop in, I've got a straw poll rolling in chat, and let's just have a quick review of what players are thinking about this one right now. Looks like 60% of the vote thinks that Andreas is going to win at a close margin. Meanwhile, 40% think that Nick will win at a close margin. No one in chat is really thinking that either Andreas or Nick are just going to wipe the floor with the other player. That's interesting.
Well, I would be very surprised if we come out of this tournament with a whitewash. These are both excellent players with different strengths and weaknesses. And we've just seen, I don't know if you're watching the lobby, Marshall, Nick has just changed his commander from a beast commander into what can only be described as a flattened pumpkin.
Flattened pumpkin! I don't know if we can allow any commander other than a beast to be used.
This is not what the spectators turned up to see. They wanted to see beasts versus beasts, not beasts versus squashed fruit.
Absolutely disgraceful. I mean, he is called the Command Donut, so I think that gives a little bit of a clue as to what it's supposed to be. But it's inferior. Nick blaming the Beast Commander on his previous loss, perhaps. Ooh.
He actually has responded in the chat to that effect. It is inferior, he says. Shall we go for it? Shall we see if this brings him luck?
Let's see. Let's go for it.